unexpected town.
For me, and I'm sure you guys can appreciate this sentiment, it's always been the creepier the better. Some of my favorite buildings to explore have been abandoned mental institutions or sanitariums, where the ghost stories write themselves. I've never seen a ghost, however. Before last week, I didn't believe in anything paranormal at all, but I'm getting ahead of myself. The reason I've decided to break my silence after a year of lurking on this sub is because last week I decided to go on a road trip. I needed a breath of fresh air, a break from personal bullshit. So I decided to visit my best friend down in San Fran for a change of scenery. The drive from my coastal city, I bet you can guess which one, takes 12 hours on the southbound freeway. But I adore driving, especially alone, so I plan to use mainly back roads, the scenic route if you will, winding through small towns and wilderness. If I saw anything interesting, be it an old cabin in the woods or a charming small town diner, I'd stop and check it out. This extended my trip by a significant amount. I wound up driving 6 or 7 hours that first day. Near sunset, I started looking for a motel, but all I saw were trees and empty road. I refused to check my phone for a place to stay, liking the spontaneity and the false sense of 21st century danger. I was content in knowing I was going south and would reach civilization eventually. The sun was disappearing behind the trees and a light rain began to fall, typical for this time of year. I took my eyes off the road for a second, fumbled with the cigarette lighter, and realized it was getting a little too dark to see. I flicked on the headlights, glanced out the windshield, and immediately slammed on the brakes. My car skidded a few feet in the rain, but luckily stopped before it hit the Jersey barriers that had been set up across the road. They sprang up out of nowhere. No warning signs, no road closed ahead. Just 4 low concrete walls all the way across the 2 lanes. They would have seriously fucked up my car if I hadn't seen them in time. I'd been going 45. I caught my breath, wondering how many people had almost crashed as I did. Probably not many. I hadn't seen a single other car for the past 2 hours. A sad, dented detour sign pointed towards a road branching off to the right, through the trees, doubtlessly leading back towards the freeway. But my eyes were drawn to the road beyond the barriers. There was no sign of construction of any kind. The road was empty, and the pavement looked exactly as old as the one I'd just been traveling. My decision was not a difficult one. Carefully ignoring the detour, I maneuvered my car along the narrow strip of gravel to the right of the barriers and quite easily drove past them. I drove about 30 minutes, with no sign of construction or life of any kind. It was growing steadily darker, and I was getting unsettled. That only increased my curiosity. What was at the end of this closed road? When I crested a hill, I was greeted with the sight of a few buildings and a large wooden sign. "Welcome to," it said. I'm not omitting the name or doing anything cheeky. As to what the town's called, I'm as curious as you are. I couldn't read the name, or any of the other words. Most of the sign, from the center down, was covered in what looked like splotchy black paint, or maybe some kind of plant life. It was difficult to tell in the falling darkness, but you could see that the boards at the bottom were chipped and scratched, like an animal had gotten to it. Not anything from a monster movie, just the common weathering of old wood left in the forest, but there were man-made scratches in it too, gouged deeply in the wood over the black paint. I leaned out the window and pointed my flashlight at it. "Come in." Weird, but I've seen much worse graffiti in ghost towns, which I assumed this was. I got my heart pumping with excitement. I drove into town, past quite a few promising locations, all dark and empty. A police station, its windows shattered and subsequently boarded, the glass still glittering on the sidewalk. Houses with doors broken off the hinges and crooked shutters. A grocery store where one street lamp still burned eerily green by the entrance. An apartment building, the glass of its double doors and all the windows apparently painted, that with the same splotchy black as the town sign. Though my fingers were twitching, I didn't get out of the car. It was getting dark, and I was getting tired. I was alone and had no information on this ghost town. I wasn't about to break into places if they were occupied, especially at night with nothing but a flashlight. Because that's the thing. The town didn't have the air of 50 years of abandonment. Besides the boards across doors and windows and a lack of electric light, this place looked like it could have been inhabited yesterday. There was no building decomposition or crumbling masonry, at least from what I could see. No graffiti anywhere that would have marked the presence of other people besides the black paint. The architecture was modern and generally holding up pretty well. Was this really a ghost town? It must be. I didn't see a single other person. All cars were parked and dusty. All businesses looked closed. This is probably my imagination, but from the moment I drove past the sign, I felt eyes on me from all directions. I didn't feel welcome here, though I was sure there was no one to be bothered. And then there was the smell. It was faint but ever present, floating on the wind as my car crept down Main Street. That stale, earthy scent of old basements and wet, dark places. Mold. The town smelled like mold. I sped up, deciding to drive through the town and continue south. I'd find a place to stay nearby and return in the morning to do a bit of proper exploring. The apartment building and the police station were especially tempting. I'd never explored a police station before. I was just about to cross the bridge that marked the south border of town, leaving the buildings behind and continuing into the woods, when I saw someone walking down near the creek. My heart nearly jumped out of my chest. I thought I was alone. I stopped the car but didn't get a very good look in the gathering twilight before she, if it was a she, disappeared under the bridge. She was very, very thin, starvation status, I'm sure of it, and walked with a pronounced limp. She had a pale head, mostly bald, but near the top of her scalp were growing a few scattered clumps of thin, wispy brown hair. It was really long. It went over the shoulders and down her back. A filthy dress hung off her frame. I watched her for a moment with my mouth open and sped across the bridge when she disappeared from sight. She hadn't looked up at me, even though my headlights had been shining at her. Part of me thought I should see if I could help her, but most of me was screaming that that was a bad idea. I am a lone, unarmed woman, and I didn't know who or what was under that bridge. Trust your gut, they say. I reached another set of barriers further down the road, with another detour sign leading oncoming traffic towards the freeway. It seemed these barriers had been set up specifically to cordon off the town. Why? I found a motel near the freeway and a small gas station. I decided to stay the night and go back first thing tomorrow. Called my friend in San Francisco and excitedly explained my discovery and why I might be another day late. Now that I was out of the town, I brushed off the feeling of unease. It had been quiet and eerie, and that lady was creepy as hell, but with the freeway only 10 miles away, I figured a transient had wandered along. Maybe she was squatting in the town, but dealing with homeless people is part of the adventure. So yes, I went back. I asked the gas station attendant about the ghost town up the road. He said he used to get a lot of regulars from up that way, but not for a while. Then the road got closed. There used to be a few more signs and some police tape, he said, and he'd seen a couple cop cars parked by the barriers. I asked him the name of the village, but he said he didn't know. I thought that was really weird. Why wouldn't you know the name of a town half an hour away? "There's nothing up that way," he said as I left. "Oh, good. My own personal harbinger of doom." The next morning, I got up and packed my backpack. Flashlight, extra batteries, gloves, an N95 respirator in case of mold or asbestos, some rope, a fuck ton of glow sticks, a few flares, a basic first aid kit, and my Swiss Army knife, plus bottled water. I also brought my handy dandy crowbar. It was heavy but worth lugging around in the face of a stuck door or window. Like an idiot, I'd left my camera at home. I'd mourned this since the night before when I looked in my bag and found it missing. I was sure I'd packed it, having planned to explore a couple places my friend knew of in San Francisco, but it's probably sitting on my bed at home, all lonely and sad. I took a couple pictures in the town with my phone, but none of them turned out. Terrible lighting, I guessed at the time. So, the first exploration. That feeling of being watched returned immediately upon crossing the bridge into the village, and as I drove towards the buildings, the scent of mold did as well. Faint but eternally present. My first stop was the police station. I weighed the pros and cons of breaking into a government building, but not for long. I was too eager. The town was as empty as ever after all. I parked in the lot behind the station, beside a few dusty squad cars. I guess the building should be called more of a sheriff's office than an actual police station. It's a low, tan-colored building with a ground floor and a basement. The windows in the back aren't busted like the front, but they're grimy. Spots of black adorn the corners of most of them, which I soon discovered was some kind of mold. I've never seen mold like it though. I tried the front doors first, in case people were actually in the building, but they were locked. I swung around back where I'd seen a metal maintenance door when I parked. It had been firmly shut, I remembered, and I didn't have much hope for it. Already planning to try to pry open a window, I came around the corner of the building. The maintenance door was open. I blinked. Yes, there it was, open just a crack. I couldn't believe I hadn't noticed it before, but brushed it off. Breathing deeply, I pulled open the door and was met with the stifling smell of mold. I got the N95 out of my bag and affixed it to my face in case of spores. I stepped inside the building after wedging the door open with a heavy rock. The hallway I stood in had a bathroom to my immediate right and a custodial supply closet to my left. It led into a large office area with many doors and cubicles. There were 3 small jail cells in the northeast corner, and through a metal door to the east was the reception and waiting area. The place was dusty and sounds were muffled, like cloth pressed over the ears. The interior had a distinct look of decay. Paint was peeling from the walls, all the light bulbs were broken, the carpet was pulling up at the corners. The mold around the windows doesn't have the usual spotty pattern I associate with mold. It grows in groups, usually in corners, in a black mass, then spreads out in long, slender lines made up of tiny colonies. I'm not even sure it is mold. At times, it looks like it. At other times, it looks like some kind of plant life. It smells like mold, though. I avoided all physical contact. The walls and ceilings of the buildings weren't moldy, just the windows. I picked my way through the office area towards the holding cells. It looked eerily as though people had up and left in the middle of a workday. Photos and personal effects still sat on desks. Papers and files littered the ground, but were also stacked high on desks in and out trays. Rotting jackets were draped over rotting chairs. Most of the doors were locked. The cells were locked too, and empty. I was a bit disappointed by the building so far. I found out why the front window was shattered when I went into the lobby. Bullet holes peppered the plaster on either side of it, and bullet casings littered the floor. A smear of what looked like dried brown blood painted the wall under the window. What had happened here? There were no bodies. Maybe it was an old crime scene, which was actually pretty cool. I tried taking pictures, but like I said, they didn't turn out. They just looked black or really blurry sepia tones. Something moved to my left. I couldn't see it, but I heard the shifting of papers and something sliding across the carpet. I froze, pointed my lights in its direction, and yelled, "Anyone in here?" No response. Heart rate quickening, I asked again and was again met with only rustling. The noises came from behind the tall reception desk. I got up on my tippy toes and shone my light behind it. The noises stopped. I saw nothing, just a swivel chair and a knocked over phone. I couldn't see under the desk, and the door to the right that led into the reception area was locked. At this point, I assumed an animal was in there. Maybe a raccoon. Raccoons freak me out. They're vicious little shits, and don't let their adorable faces fool you. In any case, I decided to leave well enough alone and check out the basement. I've mentioned several times that this town made me feel watched. Upon stepping down those creaky wooden stairs and letting the door swing shut behind me, the feeling intensified tenfold. I figured at the time that it was because it was pitch black, and I only had my flashlight to see by. The decay down there was particularly bad. The entire ceiling was covered in black, as well as the ventilation ducts. The mold oozed halfway down the wall, which dripped brackish water. Along one wall hung 3 headless human figures, brown and rotting. They made me jump violently when my light landed on them, but a second look told me that they were actually old hazmat suits that seemed to be covered in filth. The helmets lay at their feet. Someone had set up a makeshift lab down here, between filing cabinets and cardboard boxes. The rotting counters on the opposite wall held a microscope, a bunch of dirty test tubes and glassware, and a 2013 Mac desktop, which looked just as moldy as the rest of the place. That gave me pause. I'd never seen this level of decay in such a modern building. The computer looked like it had been there for 30 years. No one. A pile of papers sat next to the microscope. Mildewed and barely legible, but dense with type. I remember a few phrases from when I glanced at it, like signs of accelerated growth and stage 1 symptoms, that caught my attention. I was about to start flipping through the file, but before I could even touch it, the door at the top of the stairs behind me slammed open. I yelped and spun around. "Get up here!" someone screamed from upstairs. It was a male voice, ragged and breaking. Though the tone was aggressive, he didn't sound angry so much as panicked. It set my heart thudding. The beam of my flashlight didn't reach the top of the stairs, so I couldn't see who was calling to me. No one was at the top of the stairs when I got closer. Eager by now to get out of the building, I took them 2 at a time. The main floor hallway was empty too, which both relieved and perplexed me. Where had the man gone? Didn't matter. I decided to try to escape any form of trouble and made my way quickly towards the maintenance door I'd entered the building by. It had shut behind me, I noticed immediately, which meant someone else was definitely in the building. I raced towards it, though nothing was chasing me, almost expecting it to be locked. But it opened quite easily, and I spilled out into the sunlight. I tripped over the heavy rock I'd used to prop the door open, which had been purposely moved, picked myself up, and found sanctuary in my car. I probably should have left town then. The experience with the screaming man had set me on edge, and I hadn't really enjoyed exploring the police station. Even seeing the old crime scene in the lobby had failed to really pique my enthusiasm, prodding instead at my underlying fears. But what had happened there? Was the bloodstain connected to the lab in the basement? I wasn't done looking around town. There are a lot of pressing things going on right now, and most of them seem connected to no sleep and the infected town. It makes it hard to just write about what I did last week, since I'm dying to share these new experiences and possible clues with you. But I've decided you need the story in chronological order, at the very least to avoid confusion, and maybe revisiting these events on paper will help clear things up for me. So instead of telling you what's happening here in California, No worries, there are still no signs of moldiness, just increasing amounts of weirdness. Let's go back a week, before I'd ever heard of Jess, Liz, or Alan. After leaving the police station, I still had the whole day left and really wanted to feel like exploring this town was worthwhile. I decided to check out the apartment building. Hillside Apartments is a 4-story building on the south end of town, not far from the bridge. It's a very normal looking brick building from the outside, probably built sometime in the 80s, no signs of structural decay. The only strange thing as you're walking up to the front doors is that all the windows on the face of the building are covered in black from the inside. As with the town sign, I thought at first that it was black spray paint or something of the like. As you might have guessed though, it's mold. The front doors were locked. There was a keypad and call box, but neither seemed to have power running to them. I made my way around to the parking lot of the building, past a row of dusty cars, and up a wheelchair ramp towards the back door. It was stuck or something. The handle turned and there was no sign of a deadlock, but no amount of pushing on my part would make it open. I half-heartedly gave the crowbar a few tries, but soon gave up. The ground floor windows around front were low enough to slide through easily. Luckily for me, the third window I attempted was unlocked and slid open, only sticking once or twice. I plopped my backpack through, then followed head first. I had to push my way through the rotting Venetian blinds. I found myself in an apartment bedroom. After turning on my flashlight, I let the beam wander around for only a moment before reaching back into my bag for the respirator again. This place looked worse than the police station basement. Black mold covered the floors, walls, and ceilings. Water gathered in one corner of the ceiling as under a busted pipe, letting grey droplets escape to join the pool of water on the decaying mattress underneath. Furniture had been reduced to vague shapes, stained and rotten in tones of grey and black. I left the bedroom and walked into a living area that could have been inhabited yesterday, if not for the mold. Again, the place didn't just look deserted, it looked like it had been evacuated. A few bottles and cans littered the coffee table in the living room, near an entertainment cabinet with an expensive-looking, yet seemingly decaying sound system and TV. A couple plates sat on the counter in the kitchen, covered in black gunk, along with a sink full of dishes growing green algae. But the creepiest thing were the family photos lining the walls. Mom, Dad, 2 infants, grinning at me from silver frames. All left there hanging, mold beginning to creep over their happy, normal faces. Anyone moving out would take those, surely. I could explain away the dishes and even the electronics, but family pictures? People run back into fires for family pictures. I left the apartment, unnerved, and turned back to see which number it was. Only there were no numbers on the door. I shone my light down the hall to either side. No numbers on any doors. Why? The more I discovered in this town, the weirder it seemed to get. I decided to do a thorough sweep of the apartment building and see if I could enter every room. It would take a while, but I wanted answers. Maybe I'd even go back to the police station once I'd given the man time to leave. I find when exploring that a systematic approach works best for me. I usually choose a corner in the highest or lowest accessible area of the building and spread out from there. This ensures that if the building proves interesting and you want to make sure you've seen all of it, that you don't end up confusing yourself and skipping or backtracking. This building wasn't all that big, so I wasn't worried about getting lost. What did concern me was the idea of someone else being in the building with me. I couldn't shake the feeling. Hillside Apartments is much darker inside than it has any right to be. Darkness breeds everywhere, so deep that corners look like a void. At one point I turned off my flashlight, on the ground floor, mind you, and discovered I couldn't see my hand if I moved it more than 5 inches from my face. It was an unnatural darkness for 11 a.m. on a Saturday, even inside. Glass crunched under my boots as I made my way down the hall, and I looked up to see that every fixture was missing a bulb and had been grown over with mold. The windows all hosted their own colonies too, eliminating all light from the sun. My goal was the stairs, but I tried every apartment on the way there. More than a few were locked, but the doors I could open showed me much the same scene as the first apartment. Stained, moldy couches, cushions flattened with use, full trash bins and half-loaded dishwashers, broken desktop computers and TVs, personal effects left behind and slowly being taken over by mold, pictures, books, clothes, magazines, jewelry boxes. While personal effects remained, every identifying detail or number seemed elusive. Rot covered the date on a newspaper I found. Mail left in piles on a bookshelf had been so waterlogged that the names and addresses were illegible. It became a kind of game for me to try to find one piece of evidence as to when the town had last been functioning and who had lived here. Even a year would have made me jump for joy. I still want to confirm this. If I find that the town had been inhabited in 2012 or 2013, there's more evidence that it's the place where Alan and Liz lived. At one point, I came into the lobby, which is large enough that the beam of my flashlight didn't reach the opposite wall, swallowed instead into darkness. I didn't linger here for long. I hated feeling like I was in such a vast place, like the mouth of a pitch-black cave. Quickly, I find a door marked stairway and go inside. Whereas the lobby brought out my agoraphobia, this space seemed uncomfortably cramped. I felt I was being encroached on from all sides by the grimy walls as I made my way down the concrete steps. So much so that I kept swinging my light left and right to make sure the passage wasn't getting narrower. Raspy breathing filled the space, and I'm not sure it was just my own. Immediately upon leaving the stairway, my light found shelves filled with rusty machinery and a ceiling of blackened pipes. Custodial and maintenance tools littered the floor. The hallway ahead gave me the creeps. Like the lobby, my light was swallowed by blackness before it ended. So I turned right and went down a shorter corridor to an open door. At first glance, things looked typical for the building. Decay reigned, but everything was recognizable. A hulking mass of rusted machinery took up half the room, and pipes and ventilation shafts crisscrossed the moldy ceiling. In one corner of the wall was a set of iron ladder rungs leading up to a trapdoor in the ceiling. When I shone my flashlight towards the boilers and their pipes, something struck me as odd. It looked like something was behind the machinery. I came closer, peering between pipes and around twisted hunks of metal, but couldn't get a good look. There was definitely something back there. Finally, I squeezed myself between a boiler and a wall, changed my flashlight to the other hand, and got a good look at my discovery. It was laying on a pile of mold, as though the fungus had gathered around in a mound as a makeshift bed. I'm not sure what it was, but I have an idea after reading Jessica's story. It was tiny, smaller than most humans. It lay in the fetal position, all curled in on itself, except for its shriveled wide legs, which hung at an unnatural angle from its hips. There were no toes or anything recognizable as feet, from what I could see, and no hands besides two fused masses of flesh at the end of its arm. I could see its ribs through its flesh and the torso, but all other details you associate with a human being were gone. No belly button, no nipples, no hair. It was too pale to be flesh-toned, with a hint of gray like a decaying corpse. The head was bald and withered. Its face was turned towards me. At least I thought it was. There were no eyes, no nose, just a smooth expanse of pallid flesh over the largest mouth I'd ever seen. The creature was smiling, broadly, from ear to ear and chin to cheekbones. Its teeth were human-shaped but far longer and seemed fused together. There was no gap between teeth of the upper jaw and teeth of the lower. I freaked out. While trying to squirm out of the space between boiler and wall, I noticed something about the creature. No movement, no breathing, not even a twitch or any kind of reaction to my presence. I realized after a minute that it was dead. That was enough for me. I couldn't stand to be in the building another minute. I raced up the stairs and, avoiding the lobby, went back to the window I entered through. I fell through so quickly that I knocked the wind out of myself when I landed. As I had upon leaving the police station, I found sanctuary in my car, except this time I drove straight out of town. I rationalized these events back at the motel, between a hot shower and a cold beer. Maybe it had been a doll of some kind, or a mannequin, or even a petrified animal. I think at one point I decided it was a fucked up student art project. But now I think I saw the same creature Jazz had seen in the basement of the building 7 months ago. Only this time, it wasn't moving around. So the next day I continued into San Francisco, glad to be putting distance between myself and the ghost town. But that doesn't mean things are over. I'm not done trying to figure things out. I'm just not brave enough to do any more solo exploring. Whatever I decide to do, I'll keep you updated. Sorry about the delay in updates. Things are kind of blowing up here in San Fran. I guess locals hate it when you call it that. My laptop broke 2 days after I last posted. Not sure if it was a horrible virus or a hardware issue, but my mouse moves around on its own on-screen and I have no control over it. The movements look mostly haphazard, but it keeps opening Chrome and my Word documents, including this account, along with my other urban exploration journal entries. It opens a bunch of picture files too, but without control over the mouse I can't tell which ones. I don't think it has anything to do with the infected town, but it is super annoying and preventing me from posting here. As of now, I'm oscillating between typing this out on my phone and using Blake's, my friend's, computer. I sent my laptop to a computer guy, so hopefully it will be fixed soon. Honestly, I have other things on my mind, but I'm alive and totally fine. Still no signs of mold in California. Since I work online from home anyway, I've extended my trip here by quite a bit. Blake has to get the days off from work so he can come with me, and now we're apparently taking his girlfriend along too. I have to admit, when I first read the post by Jessica, Liz, and Ellen, I thought a few kids had been inspired by the infected town and written an elaborate scary story about it. The mold, the buildings, the body in the basement, all could be explained by separate natural events if you firmly refuse to believe in the paranormal. I didn't actually think the town was infected so much as unlucky. Still not sure where I stand on the whole paranormal issue. I might have to literally get slapped in the face by a monster before completely accepting it. But since posting these accounts and getting attention for them, I've gotten several strange messages and emails. Not sure how they, or rather you, found my email address. From 3 different sources as far as I can tell. So, as for future plans, I'm still planning to go back, this time with reinforcements, and we're going to figure out what's happening there. It's going to be me, Blake, and his girl Heather, who we met at the bar a couple nights before I got into town. They clicked immediately, so now we have a new team member. They've both been prepped on what's going on, and both of them are aware of the risks and still willing to join me. I haven't slept well since leaving Oregon. I have nightmares nearly every night, the kind where something's chasing you but you can't see it, and you can't quite get the muscles in your legs to move. I've mostly fixed the problem with melatonin tablets and vodka. having no dreams at all is superior to having nightmares. But I'm hoping that exposure to mold spores hasn't permanently altered my neurons or something. She says as though she has any idea what she's talking about. First off, a couple nights after arriving in California, I got a PM on Reddit. Here's the PM I got, in case you can make any more sense of it.
Over the midnight moorlands crying, through the cypress forest sighing, in the night wind madly flying, hellish forms with streaming hair. In the barren branches creaking, by the stagnant swamp pools speaking, past the shore cliffs ever shrieking, damn demons of despair.
Yeah, so there's that. Seems our moldy friend is a poet. I'm so not English lit, girl. The streaming hair bit immediately made me think of the lady under the bridge, and the forest imagery made me think of the woods around the town. Except that there are no swamps or moors nearby, to my knowledge. I don't know how the user Help Me No Sleep knows my name, since I'm pretty sure I haven't told anyone here. But now the secret's out. Name's Claire. Nice to meet you. I hesitate to call Help Me No Sleep Jess, or say that whoever may be posting as Alan P. WTF is Alan or Liz. I think who or whatever is behind the mold has the password to all of their accounts and a working knowledge of phones and computers, even if they suck at typing. I think the comments are just meant to tease or fuck with us. Help Me No Sleep in particular seems to want to pique my curiosity and make me return to the town. I'll rise to that challenge. The next item of interest was something I found on the passenger seat in my car shortly after I left town the second time. I'd left my windows cracked, so someone could easily have slipped it inside when I was exploring the apartment. I forgot about it when I posted the previous update, but I recently found it again, where I'd shoved it to the bottom of my backpack. It's just a note. I took this picture of it at the motel, but it's transcribed here.
Get out of this town. I don't know who you are or why you're here, but get out. I'm not afraid to take drastic measures if I see you here again. Final warning, little girl. Someday you'll thank me. A friend.
Uh-huh. I'm getting sick of vague warnings. On the back of the folded note was a drawing of a house, with caution, do not enter next to it. No idea what's that supposed to symbolize, but I'm adding the note to the evidence file. I know a lot of you will say it's Z or his organization. I don't think so. Here's why. I received this email 3 days ago.
From unknown, subject infected town. I'm going to say this once and only once. Leave that town alone. No good can come of it. We will not be there for you. We will not answer your questions or try to help. Z is dead. R is dead. Everyone who knew anything is dead. We are giving up the fight. We never had the resources for anything besides a temporary fix anyway. I'm sorry we lied. I'm sorry we pretended we were stronger. We are not. It wins. You can help us by posting this online so it knows it cannot find us. It has no cause to. We know when we've been beaten. Just leave us alone. I keep saying we, but it's just me now. Good luck, Claire. Please be smart. Do what it doesn't want you to. Just forget about it. That's the only way. I will not be in touch. I've heard it whispering to me. It's only a matter of time now. I still have my motor functions. I still have Zed's gun and one bullet. I can stop my torment. I can prevent yours. Goodbye.
Was I sent a suicide note? The email left a horrible taste in my mouth and a sinking in my stomach. Poor whoever it was. I wish I could help them. But I refuse to believe that whoever is behind all this wins. My resolve is firm, so don't try to talk me out of this. We will find answers, and we will fix this. It can't just be ignored and allowed to cause pain.